That night, Tina Turner was living her greatest comeback. Michael Jackson stood at the pinnacle of the world, yet had never felt so alone. When they met backstage, something would shift between them. Though neither could have predicted how. December 15, 1984. Madison Square Garden, New York City. Two stories were about to collide. The energy backstage was electric. Nervous excitement vibrating through the walls. Crew members rushed past with equipment, their footsteps echoing off corridors. Dancers stretched in corners, moving through warm-up routines with mechanical precision. The air hummed with anticipation, mixed with coffee, hairspray, and controlled chaos about to become pure magic. This wasn't just another concert, this was the night everyone had been waiting for. Tina Turner stood in front of her dressing room mirror, applying the final touches of lipstick, with hands that still trembled slightly. Not from nerves, she'd conquered those years ago, but from the sheer electricity of what was happening. 6 months ago, record executives wouldn't return her calls. Tonight, she was headlining Madison Square Garden, every single ticket sold out. The transformation had been brutal and beautiful, a phoenix story written in sweat, tears, and sheer stubborn will. At 45, an age when most female performers were considered past their prime, especially black female performers in an industry that preferred its women young and manageable, Tina had clawed her way back from complete career death. The divorce from Ike had left her with nothing but debt, a damaged reputation, and a voice that still carried 20 years of pain. Like scar tissue that wouldn't quite heal, the settlement had been devastating. She got to keep her stage name and her voice, but everything else, the publishing rights, the royalties, the financial security, stayed with Ike. She'd literally walked away with 36 cents in her pocket and the clothes on her back. That's it. The early days of independence, a masterclass in humiliation disguised as freedom. She played tiny clubs where drunk patrons talked through her sets, treating her like background music. The whispers followed her everywhere about what she used to be, what she looked like now. There had been the club in Phoenix where the sound system failed, the venue in Atlantic City where she'd arrived to find they'd advertised Tina Turner Tribute Night. Most of the audience thought she was an impersonator. She'd taken backup singing jobs just to pay rent, standing behind other performers while her own name faded from the credits. Recording sessions where producers would talk about her in the third person, while she stood right there, as if evaluating equipment. The absolute lowest point had come 6 months earlier, in that gas station bathroom outside Dallas. She'd been driving between gigs in a rented car because she couldn't afford to fly, living off truck stop coffee and vending machine sandwiches. Maybe Anna Mae Bullock should have stayed in Nutbush, she'd whispered to her reflection. Maybe Tina Turner was only meant to exist with Ike, but something in her voice when she said it, some echo of the girl who used to sing in the church choir just for joy, reminded her that giving up wasn't an option. The voice was still there. The fire was still burning. The comeback hadn't started with a record deal. It had started with a decision in that bathroom mirror to stop apologizing for being alive and start celebrating it instead. Tonight, she was living proof that resurrection was possible. 5 minutes, Miss Turner, came the call through her door. 3 corridors away, Michael Jackson sat staring at a wall, covered with gold records and magazine covers featuring his face. The faces in the photos smiled back, confident, joyful. But the man in the mirror looked tired, in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Thriller had made him the biggest star in the world. 30 million copies sold, and each milestone felt like another lock on a cage he hadn't realized he was building. MTV played his videos in rotation, a breakthrough that should have felt triumphant, but somehow left him emptier. The Thriller jacket was in the Smithsonian, his glove copied by children worldwide, yet he felt more like an artifact than a person. He was 26 years old, had achieved everything his child self had dreamed of. The problem was that child had never imagined what achieving everything would cost. Every phone call was screened. Every public appearance required security details. That cost more than most people made in a year. He couldn't go to a movie without causing riots. He couldn't buy groceries without ending up on magazine covers. Normal human activities, the simple pleasures that most people took for granted, had become impossible. The weight of expectation sat on his shoulders, like physical pressure that never lifted. Every song had to be better than Billie Jean. Every video had to top Thriller. Every performance had to be more spectacular than the last. The world expected miracles from him on a regular schedule, and he was exhausted from trying to deliver them. Record executives spoke about him in meetings, like he was a product to be managed rather than a person to be supported. Marketing departments analyzed his every move. Fan mail arrived by the truckload, from people who felt they knew him despite never having met him. In quiet moments like this, Michael felt the full burden of what he'd become. Not just a person anymore, but a brand, a phenomenon, a cultural force. Michael, it's time. Time for another performance where thousands screamed his name, but no one really saw him. He adjusted his sequined glove and headed for the door. As a special guest on Tina's tour, he would join her for 2 songs tonight. It should have been exciting. Instead, it felt like another obligation. The hallways of Madison Square Garden buzzed with controlled chaos. In the middle of it all, 2 paths converged. Tina rounded the corner just as Michael emerged from his dressing room. For a moment they stood facing each other. In the fluorescent-lit corridor, 2 of the biggest stars in the world, sharing a space that suddenly felt incredibly small and intensely private. "Michael," Tina said, her voice carrying that distinctive rasp. There was something different tonight. A confidence that seemed to glow from within. "Miss Turner," he replied, his voice softer than his public persona would suggest. Up close she could see something in his eyes that cameras never captured, a weariness that didn't match his age. They had met before at industry events, but those encounters had been surface level, surrounded by cameras and crowds. This moment felt different, real. "How are you feeling about tonight?" she asked, studying his face with genuine attention. "Fine," he said, the word coming out flatter than he'd intended. He cleared his throat. "Should be good." Tina tilted her head slightly. She'd heard that particular kind of emptiness before, in her own voice during years when she'd learned to give answers that ended conversations rather than started them. "You know," she said, leaning against the wall, 6 months ago I was playing clubs in front of 50 people. Some nights, even less. There were nights when I wondered if anyone would ever want to hear me sing again." Michael looked at her with surprise. This wasn't the kind of conversation stars usually had with each other. Vulnerability wasn't part of the Backstage script. "But you're Tina Turner," he said, as if the name itself was a shield against doubt. "I'm Anna Mae," she replied quietly. Anna Mae, who got beaten down so many times. I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. Anna Mae, who was told she was too old, too damaged, too much baggage for anyone to want. The corridor seemed to grow quieter around them. What changed? Michael heard himself asking. Tina was quiet for a moment, collecting thoughts that had taken years to untangle. "I stopped trying to be who everyone else needed me to be. I stopped performing for people who would never be satisfied. And I started singing for the woman in the mirror, who deserved better." "But what if the woman in the mirror is tired too?" Michael asked quietly. "What if she doesn't know what she wants anymore?" The question hung between them, like a bridge neither had expected to build. Tina looked at this young man, who carried the weight of global superstardom, on shoulders that seemed too narrow for the load. She recognized something familiar in his posture, the stance of someone always ready to perform, even in private. "Can I tell you something? Something I wish someone had told me when I was younger." Michael nodded. "Success isn't the same thing as freedom, and freedom isn't the same thing as happiness. But surviving, really surviving, teaches you the difference between all three. I don't know if I'm surviving or just existing, Michael admitted. What's the last thing you did just for you? Not for an album, not for a tour, just for Michael. The question hit him like a physical blow. He couldn't think of a single answer. I used to draw, he said quietly, the memory surfacing like something precious he'd buried and forgotten. Animals mostly. I'd sit for hours and draw pictures of lions and elephants. I'd make up stories about them, whole adventures where they'd rescue each other and explore mysterious places. His voice got softer as he spoke, and Tina could hear the child he'd been, the one who'd found magic in simple creativity, before the world had taught him to second-guess his instincts. I had this one drawing of a lion family, and I'd imagine what they were thinking, what they were saying to each other. The father lion was always protecting everyone, but he was lonely too, because being strong all the time was exhausting. When was the last time you drew something? Michael was quiet for a long moment, searching through years of scheduled appearances and recording sessions and business meetings. I can't remember, he admitted finally. I think I stopped when someone told me it was a waste of time, that I should focus on music if I was going to be serious about my career. Someone said drawing was a hobby, and I couldn't afford hobbies if I wanted to be great. Tina reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. She tore out a blank page and handed it to him along with a pen. Draw me a lion, she said. Michael looked at the paper, then at her. Here, now, right here, right now. Not for an album cover, not for anyone else, just because you used to love it. For a moment, Michael hesitated. Someone might see, someone might ask questions, but something in Tina's expression encouraged him to try. He pressed the paper against the wall and began to sketch. Simple lines at first, tentative and rusty like muscles that hadn't been used in years. His hand felt clumsy, out of practice, but as the shape began to emerge, something inside him relaxed. For the first time in months, his hand remembered movements it hadn't made in years. The way to suggest a mane with just a few curved lines. How to make eyes that seemed to look back, with eye intelligence and personality. The technique for drawing a powerful body that looked like it could leap off the page. As he drew, the noise of backstage preparations faded completely. There was just the scratch of pen on paper, and something loosening in his chest that had been tight for months. His shoulders dropped, his breathing slowed. A mane took shape, wild and free. Then eyes that seemed to carry both strength and gentleness. Then the powerful body of a lion in mid-stride, caught in a moment of graceful power. For 3 minutes he wasn't Michael Jackson the superstar. He was just someone making pictures, because it felt good. That's beautiful, Tina said when he finished. Not because it was perfect, but because for 3 minutes she had watched Michael Jackson disappear, and seen just Michael instead. I'd forgotten, he said, staring at the drawing. I'd forgotten that I used to do things just because they made me happy. That's what I mean about surviving versus existing. When you're just existing, you forget what you love. When you're surviving, really surviving, you remember that love is what makes the fight worthwhile. The stage manager appeared. Miss Turner, Mr. Jackson, we're ready for your sound check. Reality crashed back in. In minutes they would be on stage, in front of 20,000 people. But something had shifted. As they walked toward the stage together, Michael carefully folded the drawing and put it in his jacket pocket. Tina, he said as they reached the wings, thank you for reminding me. Reminding you of what? That it's okay to be human, even when everyone wants you to be superhuman. She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given backstage in years. That's the secret, honey. Being human doesn't make you less of a star. It makes you more of one. The opening notes of their first song began to play. In seconds they would become Tina Turner and Michael Jackson again. But for now they were just Anna Mae and Michael. Two people who had reminded each other that beneath the sparkles and sequins their humanity was what made them shine. As they took the stage together, something was different. Michael moved with freedom he hadn't felt in years, as if remembering that simple pleasure of drawing had unlocked something frozen inside him. Every step felt authentic rather than calculated. His trademark spins came from genuine joy, rather than practiced precision. Tina sang with the voice of someone who had truly come home to herself, not performing survival, but celebrating it. Her movements across the stage were both powerful and graceful, commanding attention without demanding it. The audience could feel it, that indefinable quality that separates a performance from a moment of truth. There was electricity in the air that had everything to do with two people who had stopped hiding behind their fame and started sharing their authentic humanity with 20,000 strangers who suddenly felt like friends. During their duet of Rock With You, they caught each other's eyes across the stage. In that moment they weren't icons sharing a stage. They were two survivors who had reminded each other that the best performances come from the courage to be genuinely real. After the show, Michael pulled out the drawing. "I'm going to frame this," he said, "to remember tonight." Remember what? That sometimes the best thing you can do for your career is to remember who you were before you had one. Tina laughed, rich and genuine. And sometimes the best thing you can do for your comeback is realize it was never about coming back. It was about moving forward. Something had shifted that night. Michael began carrying a sketchbook again, and some of his most innovative music videos would later incorporate visual elements that started as doodles in that notebook. The change wasn't immediate. Revolutions in the soul rarely are. Gradually, Michael began making different choices. He started saying no to projects that didn't inspire him, even when they promised huge profits. The sketchbook became a symbol of resistance against the industry's demand that he be only one thing. Tina continued her triumphant return, understanding that her strength came from the grace with which she chose to rise. She began speaking openly about her struggles, helping others realize that survival was possible. Her concerts became celebrations of resilience, rather than just showcases of talent. The friendship that began in that corridor continued for years. They maintained connection through small gestures, notes after successful albums, calls during difficult times, the kind of support that happens between people who have seen each other clearly. Years later, when interviewers asked them about their most memorable performances, both would mention that night at Madison Square Garden, not because of the music they played, but because of the conversation they shared. In a world that demanded they be larger than life, they had given each other permission to be life-sized and human. The drawing still hangs in Michael's home studio, a reminder that sometimes the most prominent performances happen not on stage, but in quiet moments between two people who choose to see each other clearly. In the end, that's what saved them both. The full recognition that their greatest superpower wasn't their ability to entertain millions, but their willingness to be honest with each other about the cost of that gift. And in that honest moment they found something more valuable than any #1 hit, the knowledge that they were not alone.